This week on Information Technology Leaders, Deanne Handron, Vice President at Gemini Ernst & Young. Now, here's your host, Laura Schildkraut.
Today's guest is a Vice President for Gemini Ernst & Young. In that role, she excels as the area leader for the Pacific Northwest and as the Global Microsoft Alliance Executive. But I tend to think of her as a stereotype breaker. She believes in corporate loyalty and has stayed with the same company throughout her career. She was promoted to partner at age 33. She received a special firm-wide recognition award that had previously gone only to the firm's chairman. She did all this while raising 5 children under somewhat difficult circumstances and demonstrates that a woman can be kind and caring while being professional and successful. On a personal note, she was a member of the University of Washington's e-Business Advisory Board last year while I was the program's executive director. I considered her to be one of my friendlies, a board member I could count on to provide a facilitator for our workshops, contacts for our roundtable meetings, and gentle guidance for me always. I'd like to formally thank her now as we welcome Deanne Handron. You're welcome. You're welcome. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Hollywood, California, and grew up in Southern California.
And what was that like?
It was a great kind of childhood. It was sunny and warm and beautiful, and I was the oldest of 3 kids and had a very happy childhood.
What are some of the things that influenced the person that you are today that happened as you were growing up?
I was raised in a single-parent home from the time when I was 12, and my mother was a very hard worker and was a wonderful role model. She's a tremendous mother, and I think that I learned my mothering skills from her. She wasn't a career woman. She wouldn't have gone to work if she didn't have to, but she went to work when I was 12, and she worked hard and went to school at night, and I learned a lot of great things from my mom.
So did you sort of learn about working hard?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and in fact, I have, of my kids now, my 15-year-old came home from work the other day, and he said, it was a Saturday, and he said, "Mom, I worked 25 hours this week. I don't think that's legal, but I'm not going to tell him." And I thought, oh no, I'm raising myself again. So yeah, I do work hard.
Whole family of workaholics. What were you like in high school?
I was a nerd. I was the geeky kind of kid. I was in the kinds of activities, very active in school and in lots of clubs and things, but it was definitely on the geeky side. So I was not an athlete, and my father had made me join the athletic association, so I did sports when I had to, but I had a very athletic sister that got all the awards for sports, so I didn't do those at all.
So did you get to not have to do them because you had a sister doing them?
No, I had to do them, but mediocre. I didn't like being mediocre. I think that I always did well in school, and I was a reader from the time I was very young, and I've always enjoyed reading. So I think I knew I got good grades and thing in school, and knew I was good at that part of my life.
And you were the first person in your family to go to college. Did you ever consider not going to college?
No, I wanted to be a doctor early on, and so I wanted to go to school and do all that. And we didn't have a lot of money, so I was concerned about that. But I got scholarships and went to college, and then right after that went to graduate school and got my master's degree.
What happened to the doctor concept?
I think at some point I realized that I was not cut out for the blood and guts of being a doctor. So I liked parts of it, so I ended up getting my master's degree in hospital administration because I really did want to try and save the world. And then once I got out in business, I found out that the business of healthcare is no different than the business of every other kind of industry.
Right.
So I ended up moving outside of healthcare over time.
When, kind of back to college, where did you end up going?
My undergraduate was at USC, and my graduate was from Cornell.
What made you decide to go to USC?
Well, after growing up in Southern California, that's one of the good universities there, and I couldn't imagine leaving near home. And I had a good scholarship there, and so that's where I ended up going. And I don't think I even applied to any schools that were more than 50 miles away from home.
Really?
Yeah.
And what did you major in?
My undergraduate was in psychology, which I don't know how I ended up with that, to tell you the truth. I don't even remember 30 years back to how I got there, but I started out in sciences. I was in biology, and at some point I realized that that wasn't what I wanted to do, and ended up in psychology, and it was easy and fun, and so.
Did anything that you learned there sort of impact how you manage today?
People say that it does. People say, oh, well, you can tell that you have that background because of the way you use your leadership. But I think there were things I did as a psychology major that probably influenced me more than the actual academics. For example, I worked at the hotline, the suicide hotline at USC, and I think it was the practice of active listening that you have to learn when you're participating in something like that taught me how to listen to people and how to acknowledge what they're saying. And so I'm not sure it was psychology classes, but it was those things that I was doing around it that helped me.
And as the economy starts to turn down, being able to talk someone off a bridge is probably not a bad skill.
Yeah, I use that
very handy.
for reductions in force. It's a very good skill.
Who would have thought? How did you decide to go to Cornell for your MBA?
By the time I finished my undergraduate, I decided I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to move far away. So I applied to schools that had business, that gave you a business degree with a specialization in hospitals. So Cornell had one, and Northwestern. And so I kind of decided, and Yale, I think. So I decided which of those schools I wanted to go to, and those were all far away from home, and Cornell was the farthest. So I thought that would be a great experience.
So is that why you decided Cornell?
Yeah.
Because it was the farthest?
Yeah,
really?
I'd never been out of California. So when I went to school, when I got on the plane to fly to go to school, I hadn't been to the campus before. I didn't know anything about the school. So in September I packed up and moved to New York to find out what Cornell was like. And so it was just basically picked by how can I get far away and go to a good school.
Did you find out how it gets really, really cold up there?
I did. I experienced lots of snow.
It's a big difference. You had said that you knew you wanted business. How did you shift from psychology to business?
My last semester at USC, I was not sure what I was going to do for a job, and I decided to take an accounting course. And the professor, it was a night class, it was an introduction to accounting, and the teacher was someone who'd scored the highest on the CPA exam ever in the state of California, real nerdy accountant. And he put us all in rows, and he sat the accounting majors in the front of the class, all the way back to people like me, the social science majors in the back. And I remember getting the perfect exam on the first one. And he calls out the name, and he looks in the first few rows, and I'm way in the back waving my hand. And I thought, this is kind of fun. What happened with psychology is there's no right answer. What happens there is you can feed them M&Ms and make them do something. You can try and talk to them and get them to do something. And there's just theories about why people behave the way they are. But accounting is laws. You balance your debits, you balance your credits, it always works. And it was so refreshing after all these theories to find something that just worked that I thought, boy, I like this. And so I ended up deciding that I was going to go try some business.
And Cornell is a good school for that, so that certainly worked out. Were you surprised that grad school wasn't hard for you?
Well, I worked real hard my first semester because I thought it was going to be hard, and then I was living in a house with roommates that I had picked through the mail before I got to school, and they were all taking it a little more easy, and I was studying hard, and then when I did very well, then I kind of kicked back the rest of the semesters there. But yes, I was surprised. I was expecting to be with people that were much better than me, and it turned out I was just the same as they were, and it was very nice.
You were fine with that. Looking back on it, did you feel that the MBA was necessary in achieving what you've achieved, or do you feel that it was just a credential that you needed?
I think that I needed it as a psychology major to to have the confidence to even go out to business and get a job in business. But I'm not sure that the actual academics of what I learned there helped me much beyond maybe the first year. And after that, consulting firms do a great job of teaching people. And so I feel like I learned a lot of what I know today through consulting itself.
That's interesting, because for me, my MBA, I really learned how to dissect a problem. And I didn't get that out of my undergrad. I learned how to sort of take something apart and solve it piece by piece instead of trying to solve the whole thing. I don't remember anything specific that I learned, but I remember that skill pretty well.
And teaming. I remember how frustrating it was in graduate school to be assigned to teams that didn't all work at the same speed. And that was actually, they kept telling me, this is the way that it will be when you get out to business. Well, I think one of the reasons why I've stayed in consulting so long is that the teams I'm associated with in consulting all move fast. And that was the frustrating thing about business school. They didn't always move fast, but in consulting, we usually are trying to solve the client's problem. We're on their nickel while we're trying to do it, and so we all move fast, and that was a refreshing thing to find out after business school.
Well, because you can't fire your teammates in college, although you can sort of fire your teammates at work if they don't pull their weight. And it can be pretty frustrating. What was your post-MBA recruiting experience like, and why did you accept the position that you did?
I interviewed with hospitals and considered going to work at hospitals, and then I also interviewed with a number of consulting firms, and consulting was the hot place to go in the 70s when I was getting out of graduate school, and so I was competitive enough to want to go find out what the hot thing was. I think that when I found Arthur Young, which is the firm that I started with, I felt most at home. I found the people that I interviewed with were the easiest for me to get along with, and they just felt like family, and I can't describe it any other way. But I interviewed with a strategy consulting firm that I can contrast it with, and when I finished with the interview process, I think I went to Chicago, New York, and Atlanta to interview with different groups of people, and at the end they called me and they said, you know, we like you a lot, but you're just not quite formal enough. And I thought, oh my goodness, great, because you're just too stuffy for me. So for me, Arthur Young was a place that I felt that I could be the most like who I am, and that there was some value back for being that way. And the other firms didn't feel that way.
And you're probably relieved that you didn't get an offer from them, because it probably would have been too prestigious to turn down.
Yeah, that could be. I hadn't thought of that, but that's right. It was nice not to have to worry about that.
Yeah, the time when not getting an offer is a good thing.
Yeah, that's right.
The position that you did accept was back in San Jose. At that point, did it feel good to get back to California where you don't need a winter coat?
Yeah, but I still didn't want to move too close to my mom, so I moved to San Jose, and I realized that when I did that, I didn't know anything about the questions to go through when you interview, and you find those things out once you get in the job. So one of the things I didn't ask was, what kind of healthcare practice do you have in San Jose? So I came out with my degree in hospital administration and expected to work in hospitals, and the San Jose office was completely a high technology office. And so my first client was Advanced Micro Devices, and I was at AMD for a year, and I realized after that I should have asked those questions, but after that I never looked back. I was in high technology from then on.
What was it like being in Silicon Valley at that time?
It was fun. Now in retrospect I can look back and say, wow, it was the beginning of a whole new thing, but at the time it's just, you don't even know that you're in the middle of a revolution. But we got to work with clients like Apple, that was just starting out, just a garage kind of thing, and Intel, and then there are companies that have come and gone that nobody would even remember today, Daisy Computers and Eagle Computers, and because back in those days, everybody thought the game was hardware, so there were lots of PC hardware companies, and and then there were some software companies that have come and gone. So it was really a great time to be there.
You didn't do a lot of work in business before you got to this point. You went from your undergrad to your MBA. Did anything surprise you about being out in the business world?
Well, when you come into consulting without any business experience, everything is new, and you feel as if you have to be putting your best foot forward without any experience to know what the best foot forward is. And I think the biggest surprises I had was that when I was billing out it for these outrageous sums of, $35 an hour, people expected me to know something. And I think my biggest surprise was how little I knew and how hard I had to work. I would leave the client site at 5 or 6 at night and go home all night and work, trying to be ready so that I could do the next day. And so I think that was my biggest surprise.
I think consulting comes with a lot of pressure because you're really, you know that you're new there, but your client doesn't care.
Right.
Your client's just expecting you to deliver whatever it is
That's
that they
right.
need to deliver. I know that you did a lot of work for Genentech and that they offered you a position. Why did you elect not to take that position?
I loved biotech. I've worked with Genentech and Amgen and several others, and I really do like the industry. I think, though, that I became very fond of the organization that I was with and felt very loyal to the company. And I got married in 1983, and in the first year that we were married, my husband became very ill and was in the hospital for a long time. And during that time, I also had a baby, and so I was on maternity leave. And when I came back from maternity leave, he was real sick, and I had to end up staying out longer, and the company stood by me during all of that. So when the offer came from Genentech, I thought, these guys I don't know, and I don't know whether they'll stand by me if my husband's health problems persist. So I ended up deciding to stay, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and through several mergers that we're going to talk about later, it's been 23 years and you still stayed with the same company. Is that all? That can't all be payback for their staying loyal to you, or is it?
No, I think it was early on, but then at some point you decide you want to make a difference. And what happened for me is I recognized that some people made a significant difference in my life when I needed help. And as I gained status in the company and had the ability to influence the lives of other people, I felt like it was my turn to make a difference for other people. And I was concerned that if I left and went to a different organization, I might not have that ability to pay back individuals, not pay back the company, but to make a difference for other people.
Yeah, and you said the psychology background didn't follow you. I think it did. I think it's right there. While you were in San Jose, you were promoted to staff consultant and then senior consultant and then manager and senior manager. Can you explain some of the differences between those roles? Because they all sound like just a bunch of words on the outside.
Yeah. When you start consulting at the bottom, like I did, the expectation is that you're going to bring strong analytical skills to the profession, and that you'll work under the direction of someone more senior. So a staff consultant gets a work plan and does the tasks on the work plan, but under the direction of someone more senior. And the amount of contact you have with the client as a staff consultant really depends a lot on how big the team is. As you evolve in your career, you get more and more client contact, and you also take on a different role in regards to the client. Early on, you're doing the solution that's been designed by someone else. But as you move into a senior consultant stage, you're coming up with the solution to the problem, and you're designing the work plan and figuring out how the work is going to be done. By the time you're a manager, you actually are managing the client. You're understanding what the client's issue is, and you're coming up with the solution. You're helping the team of people figure out how to solve that problem. And then as you become a senior manager, you're responsible for leading a practice, which means that you need to go out and find those new clients that have those problems that you're going to solve, and you're going to lead that group of people in solving those problems. And then now I work in a company that calls its most senior level vice president, but back when I was at Arthur Young and Ernst & Young, it was a partner. And the partners are the ones that are responsible for managing the practice and the overall economics of the business.
Sounds like there are some pretty rigid lines between some of those roles. Is it common for somebody in their fairly early years to be making recommendations and proposals and things like that, or do they tend to not be listened to as much?
It depends. It depends a lot on the culture of the organization that we're consulting with. We have a project going on right now with a timber company, and in the more traditional industries, you find that the people don't turn over as much. So in this timber company, we have client employees that have been there 25, 35 years. And so to bring in a consultant that's 28 years old, who's going to tell these people who've worked there a long time how to do things, requires a very different skill than going to a high growth, fast-moving company where the employees are our age or younger and telling them what to do. They're used to working with people at the young age of some of our consultants. So it really depends on the culture of the organization, and it requires a different set of skills to work with the different kinds.
Does it also depend on the makeup of the team itself? I'm sure some senior managers are more comfortable with that than others.
Yep, we are talking about the senior manager that's running this timber project. He's worked in the timber industry a long time. He's from the South. He talks very slow. He listens very well. He never interrupts. He never stops in sentences and things. He's just perfect for this company. Whereas if you went to Microsoft, everybody interrupts everybody. You never finish the sentence. Somebody's always coming in, and it's just the difference in a fast-moving culture where people don't stop to analyze. They just kind of keep moving, and versus timber where things don't change fast.
It's like watching grass grow.
Yeah, that's right.
At some point you made the decision to move to the LA office from San Jose. What prompted that decision?
I had said earlier that my husband had gotten very sick, and he had open heart surgery. He had been born with a defective heart valve. So in 1984, he had open heart surgery, and we were concerned about what would happen to his career. And just after that, he got a promotion internally within his company, and we thought, well, this would be a good time to sort of put his career first. So we moved to LA, and I transferred within my company, and that was Arthur Young, and was able to work in the high-tech practice in Los Angeles.
You made partner when you were in LA, and what did that mean to you, the concept of making partner?
Well, it was wonderful to be part of the leadership team, and I think for me, making partner was a signal that I really was a consultant that had a career with consulting. It's one of the things that frequently happens to people who come into consulting is we look at it as a temporary place to stay in between jobs where we can shop around at lots of companies, figure out what we really want to do when we grow up. And so I kind of had that attitude too. And I made partner after I'd been a consultant for 9 years, so you would think I had realized I was going to stay in consulting. But that to me was the point when I realized this is what I want to do, and I am going to stay in this career.
And how did your role change?
Well, it's a highly measured role. You're measured by your sales, you're measured by the profit on your job, and when you're a senior manager, there's always somebody you can ask. When you become the person that's the final decision maker, there's nobody else to ask. And I think for consultants that work in big firms, there is always a feeling of partnership that if you need to take time out or you need to do something else temporarily, someone will cover for you. But that's a lot different than somebody to ask. So in consulting, you always are running your own business, but thankfully for me, with a family, I've always had partners that could cover for me when I needed to do that too.
Did you like not having anyone to ask?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you like that part.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would find that scary.
Mm-hmm.
No.
No, I like leadership.
And fast forward 5 more years, and then you moved to the Seattle office. What brought that move about?
Well, by then we had a whole passel full of kids, and we decided that living in LA was a tough place to raise kids. Mike worked downtown, and he had a long commute, and I worked out in the valley, and we lived in between, and we had a Spanish-speaking housekeeper who stayed with the kids, and we had one of our little boys couldn't even speak English, and that was when we realized, you know, this little guy, you have to speak in Spanish to get him to do anything. So we realized we weren't spending enough time with our kids. So Seattle seemed to us as a perfect place to live on one income. So when we moved up here, my husband quit working.
Really?
And so he stayed home with the kids during the 10 years that we've been here.
Now, the fact that you were raised in sort of an untraditional household, did that make that easier for you, or it was?
It was always easy for me. It was hard for him. For me, he just went back to work a couple of months ago, and it's been horrible at home. And so he lasted for 3 months, and he said, "This is really bad. I'm quitting again." So it's wonderful. But for a man, it's very hard. He would go along to business meetings or to things with me, and he always felt like he was, you know, Mr. Me, and he didn't like that. And so it was hard on him. But for me, it's been wonderful to have him at home helping with the kids.
So in the Seattle office, you sort of run the general practice. What's that role about?
We are very organized very much around industry sectors, so that all of the vice presidents are responsible for a vertical industry. But there needs to be somebody who sort of pulls it together and says, here's the clients that we ought to be going after, and we need somebody in the manufacturing sector or in the utility sector in this practice, and goes out and finds that person. And so my job is to be the one that sort of fills in the cracks where the other VPs aren't.
One of the things that I think happens as you start moving up in a corporation, you start moving further and further away from the people who actually touch stuff. Has that been hard for you, or has that been kind of easy for you to be able to look more strategically?
It was easy to move away, but it's very scary to be in a place where you no longer can do the work of the people that you manage. So I go out to meet with my client teams, and I look at the work they're doing, and I think, boy, I hope it's good. I can talk to the client about their business issues. I can make sure that the theory of what we're trying to do is right, but the teams that work for me have a much better handle on how to do the work than I do today. And so while it wasn't hard to get to this place, it is hard to be in this place.
Yeah. How do you manage technical people when you're not technical?
Well, you've done it too, so you know this one. It's I think that the same instincts you use about whether people are doing things right or wrong are what you use even when you're over your head in terms of technology. I think when I first moved to Seattle, we lost one of my partners who was running a very technical information engineering practice, and we had a very large project for a utility, and I knew nothing about this kind of work, and I picked it up because he was gone, and I learned to trust the people that I felt like I could trust, and to continue to ask questions of the people that I thought I could trust with the answers, to find out what I didn't know. And I did the same thing I'd done when I started consulting. I'd go home at night and read books and try to understand what the work was. But it was scary.
How do you draw that line between trusting what people know and what you need to know on your own? How do you figure out how deep you need to go?
Well, it turns out that almost none of the clients I work with know it any better than me. So after I got to realize that they were trusting me, and if I could trust my people, we were all okay. That helped a lot. because as long as I've got good people, I'm fine. So now what I look for are people with great track records and all of that, and I try less to worry about the fact that that I don't know. And for the most part, the clients think I know it. So that's good.
Isn't that a little scary?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
That would scare me. When you first moved to the Seattle office, you trusted someone who you shouldn't have trusted. Can you kind of tell us about that and what you learned from that?
Yeah, I had a senior manager that was running a project for me that I trusted him, and I would go visit, like I do all my clients, go visit him once a week and spend time trying to understand what they were doing, talk to the client, make sure everything was okay with the client. And what he did was negotiate with the client to take the job away from us, and he quit our company, and he told the client he would do the work cheaper on his own, and it's a pretty ugly scene when a consultant does that. And we have
pretty smarmy.
Yeah, it is pretty crummy, and we have contracts now that prohibit them from doing that. But at the time, I went and explained to the client, hey, this is what he's doing. He has a contract not to do it, and the client said, "Well, tough. I'm going to let him do it." And so it was a brutal thing. And I think I learned at that point, you really do have to pay attention, and you have to, when you start to get signals that things aren't right, you have to pay attention to them. And he was doing a good job, and his client was happy, but he wasn't a loyal company player.
It says something about the metrics that you use, doesn't it? So the client's happy, he's happy.
Right, and the work seems to be getting done.
Yeah. But you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You now spend a lot of your time on the Microsoft Alliance. Can you tell us what that's about and what your role is in that?
I think what's happening in business in general is that companies aren't going it alone anymore, and it's a little bit like what we learned from the Japanese. The companies kind of form these keiretsus, and they ally themselves with each other and go to market together. And so one of the things the consulting firms have done is line up with technology vendors that are driving lots of work and become the service arm for those vendors. So that there are some vendors that have their own consulting capabilities, and IBM is probably the biggest case of that, where their consulting practice is one of the top 5 in the world, as is ours. So there are other vendors that have decided not to be in the services business in nearly to that extent, and Microsoft is one who has chosen instead to use third-party alliances. So for our company, having a relationship with Microsoft means that for the high-end Microsoft customers, we can provide the services that Microsoft doesn't provide that help to integrate all of that software. And for us, by having an alliance with Microsoft, we get to stay up with the most current technologies, and we don't have some of the marketing costs and marketing expenditures that Microsoft does for us. So it works well for both of us. And so for the last 5 years, I've managed our alliance with Microsoft, and it's currently about $500 million a year in work that we do on Microsoft platform.
Could you give us an example of a project you've done for a client? Something that's not proprietary?
Sure. A Microsoft-related project. Yeah. We do, right now we're doing a lot of work in portals where we're helping companies put together enterprise-wide portals that are basically ways for the company to communicate with their employees. And what the portal will do is provide visibility to all the different things that an employee needs to be successful at their job. So it's a place where we connect all the different systems that an employee uses day to day into one little place they can log in and get to everything they need. So lots of what we're doing today is portal work.
And your employees enjoy that kind of work?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have technologists who love building with the new Microsoft technologies, but we also have process consultants who love making the work for an employee, for a client employee, easier. So what's good about that particular kind of work is that our process people get to design a better way for an employee to work, a more efficient, a more effective way to work, and the technology guys get to build it.
Get to play with it. They get to diddle. They like that.
They do.
Yeah. Back on the business side, soon after you joined the Seattle office, Arthur Young merged with Ernst & Winnie to become Ernst & Young. Now, Capgemini has kind of created a merger. How did those mergers differ, and how are they the same?
When Arthur Young and Ernst & Winnie merged, it was two accounting firms that were also in the consulting business, so it felt we were about the same size. We were both very much U.S. dominated firms, although we had a little bit of global work, but it was very much two equals coming together. When last year, when we sold our consulting firm to Capgemini, it was a very different kind of coming together, because Capgemini was European. It's the largest system integrator in Europe, with a very small practice in the U.S. And they also had a very different culture. They weren't an accounting firm that was in the consulting business. They were a consulting firm that was publicly held, so they had public reporting requirements. And their business was much more low-end system integration and large project management. It wasn't management consulting, and so it was very different work, very different cultures, the global aspect. So it was a much harder transition for the people in the U.S. to get through.
And as all these mergers have happened, are you still feeling that same sense of loyalty?
Yeah, it changes though. I'd say overall my sense of loyalty to the company is to my friends, is to the people, and as long as those people are still here, I feel very loyal to them. But the company is very different than it was when I joined.
They created a somewhat unique organizational structure. That's something that we don't talk a lot about in our classes. Can you tell us about the organizational structure and what sort of works and what doesn't work about it?
Of where we are now?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say that one of the things that has happened is that during the 90s, we grew very fast by having an economic model and an organization structure that was based on growing fast and having a big recruiting machine and everything. And then what happened at the time when we merged with Capgemini is we had the same model, and we were matrixed to industry sectors and to the skill sets that we delivered to projects. And what happened is right about the time we came together, the economy collapsed, and this matrix, highly matrix structure became unwieldy. A little bit hard to downsize or to hold people accountable when you're really positioned for growth rather than positioned for a market that's shrinking. And so one of the big lessons for me in that is that you really have to have an organization that flexes for what's going on outside the organization. And what was very successful for double-digit growth every year is not going to be what you do in a stagnant market.
So how are you repositioning things so that it will work in a more stagnant market?
We're simplifying. So our org structure now is very simple and easy for everybody to understand. There are very few positions that look like overhead, so everybody's in a line position and out there accountable for making things happen.
It seemed that both of these mergers happened at times of economic downturn. Is there a tendency inside the company to blame things on the merger instead of the economy?
Yeah, I'd say that the two I've been through have both happened right at the onset of a downturn, and so one of the things I've seen is people can't differentiate whether it's the new culture that's causing the problems, the aches and pains, or whether it's the economy. And I think now it's clear that it's the economy that's causing the problems that we're having now. But it's for consulting firms do well in times of growth. They also do well in times of a downturn, but they don't when it's transitioning from one to the others when they don't do well, and that's because people hold on to their wallets and don't want to do any kind of spending, either spending for capital growth or spending for downsizing. They don't want to spend when they're not sure what's going to happen next. And that's the inflection point we're in right now.
You've said that internally people are starting to fight over the scraps. What does that mean?
Well, I think instead of going out and working in the marketplace, what happens when times are tough and there's not enough work is everybody fights for clients that we wouldn't go after normally, and fights for little kinds of projects that we wouldn't really care to do in a better economy. So we're all just trying to stay busy, and you do work that isn't as important. You do it at a lower price point too, and so all of the consulting firms have changed their pricing models in the last year, and are all working much cheaper.
And hopefully more efficiently.
Yeah.
Gotta hope. Is not working in a hierarchical structure kind of frustrating, or is it sort of freeing?
Well, I'd say we're in much more of a hierarchy now that we're in a public company than we were before. As a partnership, I think you have a lot of freedom to do what you think makes sense and to build your own practice. And if you can't do that, then you're let go. In a corporate structure, we have senior VPs and we have regular VPs and we have EVPs, and so one of the transition issues of going from a partnership to the corporate structure is not knowing exactly who you need to ask, knowing that you're probably not able to make some decisions you used to make, and not knowing where to go. But that's a transition issue. But I think that that a corporate structure is for someone who's been in a partnership for 20 years is much more constraining. There doesn't feel that same sense of owning my piece of the business that I had before.
So how do you make it okay for your clients if it's not necessarily okay for you? I mean, you as a group through the transition.
Well, I think for my clients, whether I like the structure I work in or not doesn't really matter. If I can deliver great work, it's wonderful for them, because what I'm trying to do is help them solve a problem. So I think we do that just fine the way we're structured. Any event. Consultants love to consult, and whatever's going on with the economy or with the office, you forget about that when you're out with the client.
You've recently gone through some layoffs, and I know that that's difficult for your company as it was through any company. How much more difficult was it when you don't have this sort of hierarchical structure within your office where they know who to go to at the end of the day?
Yeah. It's been a little difficult now because our layoffs have been by industry group, and the industry group leaders aren't necessarily in the same office where we are. So if we end up laying off somebody who's in the financial services industry and the leader for that is in San Francisco, I end up having to do it, and I may not even know the person very well because I wouldn't have hired them, I wouldn't have worked with them. So it is much harder for them because their leaders are outside our office, and much harder for me to be able to explain it and all that. So.
But then on the flip side, there are a bunch of people who didn't officially work for you who said, if it has to happen, I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, that's right.
And how much pressure did that put on you?
Well, we're not that big of an office. We just have a couple hundred people, so I do know most of the people, and I was involved in hiring many of the people that we have in the office, particularly the more senior people. So I have been part of the discussion teams and the layoff teams for almost everybody, just because I feel obligated, feel committed to those people and their careers.
Yeah. How do you handle those kinds of stressful situations, and is that different from the way you would handle sort of a business project stress?
Well, I communicate, first of all, with everybody. I found out that the most successful way to talk to somebody about laying them off is to tell them ahead of time that it's likely, and then to give them some warning so that when we finally do it, they're not shocked. And so now it's pretty much a joke in the office that if anybody has an appointment with me, a private appointment, it means they're being laid off. So I don't even get appointments with anybody anymore. But what I do is I call them and say, we have to talk on Monday, and on Monday we're going to have a meeting with HR, and so they know what it's about and they have time to get ready. And so by the time we get together, it's less stressful for them, less stressful for me. So that's one part of it. Is good preparation, making sure that it's not a surprise. The second part is I have a group of friends, group of colleagues that I talk to about my stress, and they talk about theirs, and we, we'll go out after work and have a drink together, and it's cold and callous to be laughing, but we're laughing to let off steam, like the surgeons do after an operation, because it's very tough to downsize.
And is that the same way that you would handle the stress of a project that's either going badly or?
Yeah, project that's going badly definitely needs time and attention, and I would spend a bunch of time out with the project team and with the client trying to understand what the problems and issues are, and sometimes you need team building kinds of things to get everybody refocused. Other times you need technical help in the project team to make it go right. So it really depends on the issues. But the basic thing is that you do to relieve your personal stress are about the same. Yeah, just find some friends that you can talk it over with, and go for a long walk, those kinds of things.
You talked about trying to figure out what's wrong with the project. Is that easy for you or hard?
It's easier the longer you've been a consultant. You can spot the problems pretty fast, and you have an intuition after a while about what's likely to happen on a project. Many times, from when you first sell the project and first get going, you already know how it's going to end up. You can see the outcome. You can see the issues you're going to have, just because you can tell what the client's like. You can tell what your team is like. You can tell what the issues are going to be. So many times you can head them off even before you end up with those problems.
Yeah, it's funny when you can sort of see it coming and you're like, I knew it.
That's right.
You just hope you're smart enough not to ignore it, but you got to listen to that little voice. How do you gain a client's trust? Let's say it's a client you're working with for the first time.
Most of the time, clients want to know that this isn't the first time you've solved this problem. So probably the thing that helps the best in gaining trust is relaying stories that show them that you've been there before. So if I can use one client to give a reference to another client, I'll do that. So I'll call up one client and say, I've got an opportunity with another client. Would you be happy to talk to them? So that helps to take the credibility of with one client and move it on to another client. But many times it's just being able to talk knowledgeably about the issues and show them that you have the experience and confidence to be able to do it again.
You've obviously been very successful. Are there any challenges that you think you faced as a female executive that you might not have faced as a male?
I feel very privileged that I came along in consulting at a time when there was receptivity to women. I was the first woman partner on the West Coast, so I joined at a time when it was just turning. But I myself have had very few difficulties. I had one time when a client was referred to me by a Midwest office, and they had a subsidiary out in California, and I called the particular client and talked to him about his issue, and it was something I understood. It was inventory management or something, and we talked about it, and when we finished, I said, well, we'll come out on whatever Wednesday and we'll talk to you about the problem. And he said, don't take this personally, but could you send a man? And I said, well, it'll have to be someone who works for me because there's no one above me. And he said, well, that'll be fine. And I thought that was a funny and unique experience that I remember even 10 or 15 years later. So, but those kinds of things have been very rare.
And so you brought a man with you and you did all the talking anyway?
Well, I try to be quiet in meetings, but I never can. Yeah, so I did bring a man, and he probably tried to talk, and I did anyway.
We'll take questions from the audience after these messages.
The University of Washington Business School, located in Seattle, Washington, ranks among the top business schools in the United States. Information Technology Leaders is one of the many ways the UW Business School forges partnerships and reaches out beyond the university. For more information about the University of Washington Business School or Information Technology Leaders, visit informationtechnologyleaders.com.
I'm learning to care for prostate cancer patients at a UW teaching hospital. I study cancer cells from those same patients in the lab. Being able to study the disease, care for patients suffering from it, and research new ways to diagnose it helps me to see the whole cancer care picture. I'm researching a way to isolate a patient's cancer cells. Then we can determine how to treat them effectively and increase a patient's chances of survival. That would be so exciting.
What exactly sets Capgemini Ernst & Young apart from the rest of your competitors such as Accenture or Deloitte Consulting?
That's a great question. You're Daryl?
Yeah.
Daryl. Well, for me, it's the culture of the organization and the quality of the people that I get to work with. I can't speak to Accenture or Deloitte, which are obviously very good firms too, but because I've never worked there and I've worked here for so long. But I think we recruit just exceptional people, and I think the same thing that attracted me to our company, that feeling of being part of a team that you really want to work with, people you respect, people that make you feel like you're home. That's the kind of people we have, and every team I work on, every time I get to meet new people in our organization, I feel like I'm with the best. And we have a saying that when you get put on a project team that's working on a proposal, we attract people from all around the globe to work on these proposal teams, and we always say that within 2 days, you're with Capgemini Ernst & Young people, because we all know the same language, we all feel like we're part of a team, we all have fun together, we contribute. So for me, what sets us apart is our culture. I think all of the big firms have an orientation towards high quality work, and but the way we relate to our clients and the way we relate to each other is exceptional in my mind.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think makes a better consultant, someone who's a generalist or someone who's a specialist, and maybe also, if there's a minute, do you think that being a woman has any effect on whether or not you're a generalist or a specialist in this field, and how others view you?
Okay. I would say that that's the subject of great debate. And one good thing about being an old-timer in an industry is that you know that there's no right answer. When I first started as a consultant, we were all generalists, and then we went to specialization, and then we went back to generalization. And part of the answer depends on where you are in your career. Early in your career, I believe from my experience that it's important to specialize. You don't specialize when you first come in the door, but over time, over the first few years, you develop very deep competencies in something that you're able to deliver to a client. So that deep competency is of high value to a client. Over time, in order to relate to senior executives who are themselves generalists, you need to develop a much broader picture so that you can sit down with an executive and be able to relate what they're doing to other stories from other industries or from other areas of a business. And so I think where you are in your career makes a big difference. I have not found that gender differences really relate too much to the generalization or specialization thing. We have some very technical, specialized women and men, and we have some very general skilled men and women. So I don't think that the gender makes much difference.
That's great.
While working with Microsoft, have you had any recent exposure to technology that'll impact the public, such as wireless innovations?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have a mobile computing, mobile commerce project going on with Microsoft right now, and we're working with them on their .NET architecture, which I think is going to be a big change in computing. So in general, I think as we all move towards more computing on the network and less on whatever device we use to access the network, whether it's a phone or a PDA or a PC, I think that .NET architecture is going to have a big change for us. And you know, the networks that we're going to have in our houses that are going to connect our appliances and our TVs and our stereos and everything, those are very big changes that are coming, and I feel very privileged to work with Microsoft on those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salmon have to overcome incredible odds to survive. Sometimes people can help. I led a research project on flow rates in a local stream. Working with research assistants from psychology and English opened my eyes to the complex relationship between science and public policy. Now, when I work with school kids at the UW hatchery, I tell them the whole story of salmon, forests, streams, and human habitation. Future generations, salmon, and people will benefit from our research.
I'd like to close with a composite quote from somebody who works for Deanne. And she said, "My first impression of Deanne was that she was energetic, enthusiastic, wonderfully bright, and full of good ideas. In the 5 years I've known her, those impressions have been confirmed and strengthened. In thorny situations, she is very adept at understanding core issues and coming up with resolutions. As a manager, she's trusting and supportive. She's willing to dive in if necessary, but trusts you to get the job done. She's good at delegating, but doesn't abandon people. As a woman partner, she's become a wonderful role model for how to balance career with a private life and still be a stellar leader." Thank you very much.
Thank you.